It's
Oh. When are we starting? Okay, all right, I'll stop.
Well, let me explain something first. I'm in my kitchen right now, but I'm going to move to another room and call in from another device. That being said, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Sperdunky and Friends Indie Game Devs live show, where we explore indie games with the developers. Oh, son of a bitch.
it's fine. Let's roll with it.
I think at this point,
Just roll
let's
with
just
it.
roll with it. Okay.
Welcome to Sperdunky and Friends, the Indie Game Dev live show, where we talk with the game developers of indie games. I'm Sperdunky. I'm a level designer and an indie game developer, or aspiring to be. Stay tuned if you're interested in indie games, how they're made, the people that make them, and how you can get started making your own games. This is Sperdunky and Friends. I'm Sperdunky. These are my friends. Go ahead, Nate.
All right. Hi, I'm Nathan, also known as J-Bobs Online. And I'm 21. I started game development when I was 15. I was basically just I started with initially doing like a few assets here and there for this little Lego project. It was like a Lego Halo project. We were all we all wanted to make like Halo 1 in Lego form because, childhood dream. And I wrote my own story for that project. And then basically it turned into a thing where I was like, okay, I'm working on my own game. And I started Coral, a Halo fan game. So, from there, I basically have been working on that for, 5 years now, and met Tori here throughout the way, actually pretty early on. We ended up clicking really well, working really well together, and we were like, well, let's start a indie game studio. We had so many different game ideas to work on and to work with, so we kind of hit the ground running. Kind of took our experience and started taking it in a new direction. Now we're still working on Coral, but one of the big things is we kind of use that knowledge that we learned and are applying that to our new studio, CoralWave, which actually Sperdunky is a part of. He does levels, for one of our current projects, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. But is it fine if I pass it off to Tori?
Yes, go ahead. Sorry, I was muted.
You're good.
All right. Okay, well, hello. I am Tori, also known as Yesful Man, and ironically also known as Sergeant Katz, Commander Katz, some form of Katz in some of our dev circles. I met Nate obviously through the thing. It was kind of funny because I wasn't planning to stay on very long. That was back when it was called Supernova, right? Yeah. And then it's like I'm going to stay for like a week, and then next thing I know, that has been the longest week of my life. So
I'll only stay around for 2 weeks, and then I'll go back to my other game development stuff. It's been nearly 6 years now.
Mm-hmm. But with that, I've also gained. Speaking of all that, I've been trying and failing at many different game studio and startup things, and so far we've had the most consistent push and everything with Nate, and it's been kind of a pretty cool journey. So a lot of beating our heads against the wall, but at least this time it was like not alone for me, so that's been pretty cool. But sorry to drag you in.
You see, it's because I know a thing or two about making games. I'm kind of hyper obsessed with building things. So I really enjoy tinkering, and then on top of that, because of that, I worked with like computer hardware when I very first started.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I was like 8 years old, people would give me their old PCs, and I would, tinker, swap the RAM around, do all that other stuff. And then eventually, my cousin Wes actually introduced me to programming I had never really had a formal introduction to it, but like for years, he would try to teach me like this or that in programming, and it was kind of like it was he was doing most of the work for the first few years of that. It was like my middle school years, but eventually once I started Supernova, which is now Coral, um, he actually we had kind of this project that we could work together on, where we actually were both contributing large parts of the code base, contributing to large parts of them. So I'd build a certain system like the animation stuff, the animation backend, and he would work on networking stuff, or like kind of the more important and the more boilerplate code. Um, and he's not on the project anymore, but a lot of what he worked on taught me so much about just how to think, when it comes to programming. And because of that, like I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah. Ironically, my journey was the opposite. It was starting with art tools like Blender and stuff, and then now I'm moving more into programming and kind of filling in the role of technical artist, especially with how much stuff's been pushed lately in the industry. So it's like I got to keep up with this stuff and be able to relay that to the teams we're working with, both Coral and CoralWave, and yeah. So I'm
And
real
you
quick,
can go.
what for people who don't know, what is Coral and what is CoralWave?
So that's actually good. Glad you brought that up, because there needs to be a good distinction between that.
Yes.
Please, Microsoft, there's a distinction.
I'll explain it because I came up with a good analogy right before we started.
Go ahead.
So since Tori and I both work on Coral and CoralWave, CoralWave is like a car manufacturer, right? You work at a car factory. Think of it like that. And Coral is like your Model A or Model M like project car on the side. Just because both of the people work on, at the car factory doesn't mean that the car factory owns the model, the hobby car, right? Your like Civic tune car that you want to build, it's like that, is its own little thing. So we have, there's while we do have some overlap with members, it's not the same organization. So sorry,
I'm laughing at what Sperdunky's putting on screen.
So what you're seeing is Coral Halo fan game in its very interesting state. Some of these are older footage, and some of this is newer footage. And you're about to see the Warthog go all pimp my ride moment right there. But yeah, so Coral Halo fan game was the first project. So it started before CoralWave. In fact, one of the reasons why we call it CoralWave was because we wanted to kind of keep have an homage to Coral as a project, because it's something that we really we really take passion in this kind of world that we've built. But the world itself is in the Halo universe, so it's going to be I love that crotch shot.
I know.
But yeah, like the Coral Halo fan game is its own thing. And CoralWave, we have new titles, new worlds that we're building, completely new universes. And even though we're working on both of them, most everything is going to be separate in terms of content, in terms of systems. Aside from one thing I'll touch on, and
to just clarify that point a little bit more, for anybody like in Microsoft or something, which I doubt they'll see, but just on the off chance, Coral is not at all under CoralWave. It is its own separate project. We just happen to be at the top of both of them, and that's the big thing. We're trying to do as much separation there as possible, because we want both of those types of projects to succeed, but they're both separate from each other. Anytime there may or may not be any type of like crossover, it won't be any Halo content, all that kind of stuff. It's just Halo. Everything Halo related stays in Coral like it should, and then everything else is kind of our own IP, our own code, or everything else we're building, or anything we buy or whatever. But that's not very much, because we like to do things the hard way.
And that's kind of the thing. That was something I was that Wesley really taught me was, home growing your code, not just going out and buying some other stuff, other people's like systems to use. And you could say that engines are that way, but like, you can only go so far in that sense. Unreal Engine has Fortnite budget, and being able to use Unreal Engine, especially Unreal Engine 5, we were one of the earliest adopters of UE5. I wanted to learn it and get to know it and use it before really any of the industry was able to. So I used it in early access 1, early access 2, and then when was building Coral in the pre-release versions of UE5 after early access 2. So like I would actually compile my own Unreal Engine build, because then it was a lot like we're indie developers, so we don't really we can't really like we can both we have an advantage and disadvantage where we can learn new technology early by getting to use it, but it also takes longer for us to learn in depth a lot of the features. We don't have access to Epic Games for like we have their documentation, but it's also kind of cryptic in a way. So being able to kind of adopt it earlier and kind of see a lot of the new features as they're being built really helped with pushing us forward. So now we can use Unreal Engine 5 for Coral, for the Battle Balls project, which is a CoralWave game that we'll touch on later. And yeah, I feel like Unreal Engine 5, it can do a lot of great things, and you just kind of have to use it right. You just not make a crappy asset flip, and we're not here to do that. We're here to make amazing experiences and have a lot of fun while working on completely new things that people haven't seen before.
Yeah. Touching on that, I just wanted to ask real quick, what are like some of the big differences as far as like the vision between Supernova and Coral?
Basically, aside from gameplay, everything. So Supernova was originally
I was going to say there's a lot of restructure, because like part of the reason it became a whole new project was because we had a little bit of some internal drama, and we realized there's some other issues. We're not going to get into that. That was a whole thing. It was early days. We were figuring things out. And of course we weren't organized, and that caused a lot of issues, just to put it simply. And that's something that we've constantly been trying to do better and better since Supernova to Coral, to Coral, where we're trying to be more structured, more organized. Sometimes that's kind of come at a little bit of a fault. It's part of why things aren't happening as fast as it seemed like they were in Supernova when we didn't know what we were doing, and we also weren't producing as good quality like assets and stuff. But because of that, we were able to get some better quality things, like some of those concepts and some of the stuff you see on screen. We started getting better ones, but we've gotten less of a turnaround. People have gotten busy and stuff too, so that's been part of the issue with that. But most of it's been structural, and of course part of it marked the change from Unity to Unreal, which if you want to get into that, Nate, that's even though I know early in I was like Unreal, but then I was kind of like, that was stupid, and now we're like back at Unreal.
So there's actually a good reasoning behind that. Unity is great and also terrible, and I don't mean that in to like say that Unity is an unusable engine that is terrible and nobody should ever use it. Even if I say those words, I don't necessarily mean them all the time. It's one of those, you need the right tool for the job. And so Unity was great for our introduction, just because it's open enough that you can kind of build your own little just whatever systems within it and not have to worry about doing it right. You know what I mean? So that's where Unity was amazing. It's so open in that sense that you can just like, you don't have a set structure of, okay, you have your actors, but you also have a built-in, pawn system that always gets controlled by a player controller. Like you build your player controller by yourself. You build your your player like characters by yourself, and it's very freeform in that sense. But that's also its downside, is that if you're wanting to build a first-person shooter video game that does almost everything that almost every first-person shooter video game has done for how many years, you basically have to reinvent the wheel inside of Unity. So it's amazing
Yeah.
in flexibility. And not that you can't build other games in Unreal Engine, but the best, like the easiest kind of games and the most like compatible quote unquote kind of games that you can build in Unreal Engine using most of its built-in features is like first, third person shooters. I mean, it makes sense, it started out as Unreal Tournament, and then like games like Gears of War, Fortnite. That's where the engine was really focused by Epic Games. So it's great being able to use a lot of the features that they have poured lots of time and money into. That us indie developers don't necessarily have those resources. Um, and not saying that we're trying to just piggyback, because there's a lot of work that we do to
Yeah.
build a lot of our own systems
We're
within
definitely
Unreal
not
Engine.
we're definitely not like a happy with how things are kind of company.
Yeah, we're
we're
always trying to change we're always trying to meet our own standards and trying to change things that we don't think are satisfactory about like things that we see in the industry. I think it's a really important thing for us to basically make games that we want to play. And Coral is just one of those games that we want to play, right? Like we have, I'll get a little bit, just a teeny bit into like the story idea. Um, we wanted to have like, the grandioso opening that starts off quiet and, has this build up to this grandioso moment. And that changes, the whole like context of the story. And so, a Halo experience like that with the more like classic gameplay but not feeling aged, you know what I mean? If the more aged features are more like aged like fine wine, as opposed to I feel like I'm playing a game from 2001, you know which is also part of the reason why we chose to do our own game as opposed to doing like a custom edition mod back when, because that was really all you could do when we first started Supernova. I hope that answered the question. I know it was really roundabout, but
I think we got there eventually.
Are we still live?
yeah.
So I think I'm at least seeing this. I can double check the audio. Yeah, I'm hearing myself. So
Okay. Okay, sorry. I got a message that made it seem as though maybe it wasn't still live.
Yeah.
Okay. It looks like we're good. Sorry, I totally just destroyed the flow of that.
You're good.
So yeah, what I was thinking when you're talking, it's like making the games that you want to play is like, that's kind of like the essence of what a fan game is. It's like something, it's like showing your appreciation for a game you already love. As far as that goes, that's pretty much the theme of this episode. Do you guys want to maybe go into how, or what your thoughts are on going into creating a fan game or joining a fan game is kind of a good first steps into the indie game dev scene or game development in general?
So I actually have some thoughts on it. It's kind of a mixed bag. I think in some ways it can very much so be a great intro, especially if you have a team that at least has some semblance of organization, because otherwise it can become real chaos, or everybody's kind of in their own little bubble, not realizing the mistakes they're doing, which is kind of, again, like Supernova was in the beginning. And then we kind of started getting things sorted and organized. And that's about when you came on, Sperdunky. So you kind of came in when we were a little bit more organized. We just didn't have as much time to throw out the project at that point. But if you have a team that's like that, not full of drama, not full of those problems that could really slow down and hinder a project, and then also halt some of your learning and stuff like that. Because the best thing about fan projects is you can learn a large portion of like skill sets and how to work in a team before you ever get into a team. But again, if your team like leads are not together, or they're fighting or whatever, you're going to have a lot of issues. And if you don't understand those issues or see those issues or do a lot of stuff on the side, it could end up actually hurting you more than helping. But that could be said about a lot of things in life. So it's not like that's only to this experience, because you could go into college and be like, man, I wish I learned this stuff in the place it's supposed to teach me this stuff. So it's not to say like you can't get that, but it shouldn't be your only spot. You should always be learning from other avenues too. Like it's very hard not to use YouTube as a resource at this point. So like YouTube has so much out there. Even if you're doing things like college and stuff, you should probably still be using all of these other sources. And maybe a project like a fan project to kind of really help solidify and learn and see the other areas. The biggest thing that you could always fall into, I know for me, is like early in, I was one of the better modelers in Supernova, but I didn't understand a lot of the basics of like modeling, like what a low poly and a high poly is, like what UV mapping was. I didn't understand all that, but yet I was able to make some assets like the pistol we had early in when I was still learning 3D modeling. And it's because I didn't learn a lot of these foundations, but then when you look at that thing, it had like 50 materials on it when I could have done that all in one because I didn't understand some basics.
Funny thing about that pistol, one, we still use it as a placeholder. Two, all of the he exported the textures as TGA, which TGA does not have any compression. The Magnum asset itself took up like 800 megabytes.
Oh my god.
It was insane. So there's a lot of things like that. So to add on to Tori's point, I definitely agree on the always learning from another source. If you're like wanting to go to college or in college and you want to, actually make it in the industry, one of the things I realized and saw when I was working with people in my college classes was the people that did stuff outside of college, they blew past the class. Like the classes were no issue. They just, it was, and it's not just like, oh yeah, they've been doing it for years and years. Yeah, I mean, doing it for years and years is definitely a good thing, but it's having a want, like a drive and a passion to do, like, to reach a certain goal, and using programming or using your art skills or using those skills, like learning and developing those skills to make the best version of what you want to make. That really will push you to, like, actually do what to learn what you need, to be able to get it done.
Sorry. Try not to get distracted by the chat. I'm gonna have my buddy write down the questions.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And,
okay. I have a tendency to always be reading the chat, and then
that's
like,
totally okay. If you want to write anything down too, you can.
No, I'll probably do my best to ignore it because if not, I'll want to reply to everybody who says something.
Yeah.
And that's...
we'll talk to the chat. There will be time.
Okay.
But also, as far as like game development skills, I feel like a big thing is like a lot of people get bogged down in like, oh, like I really want to do this. Like, where do I start? And I always feel like you kind of just need to start. But I've been meaning to ask you, Nate, and Tori as well. And I know Austin comes in to this a little bit too, but I was curious on how, since the beginning of the Coral project to now with CoralWave, how you guys kind of go about like choosing who to like bring in and like recruiting. And I know with me specifically, I just DM'd the Instagram and I got in, and that was
a valid way to get in. If you're ever interested in joining.
So for fan projects, it can be a little bit more loose because, like, you don't usually hold as much under lock and key, and if it does, it's not like you're usually working on somebody else's IP. So, if you're trying to do something that's like needs to be really like you have IPs you need to maintain, and there's a lot more like required secrecy to some extent for what's the word I'm looking for? The thing you have to sign, confidentiality type stuff. That's where it gets a little bit different because, like, with a fan project, you could literally do what we did with Supernova/Coral by just going on to various social medias and using that as a way of recruiting people, potentially either directly reaching out or vice versa. And you can still do that. It's not like you can't, but you can be a little more open and it's a little bit easier to get some things shown. Where with when you have more of a business, you have to do things at like a lot more structured intervals, which you should still do with a fan project, to be fair. But you can get away with being again more loose and not doing things exact and by the book and whatever. Or with the business, you want to try to do things as right as possible because it could all potentially blow up in your face if you don't recruit right, you don't hire right, you don't go onto the proper channels or whatever if you need to, and that would be probably one of the bigger things. So to get into detail, I think we originally in Supernova and Coral, I think we were on IndieDB for the thing, right?
IndieDB
Yeah.
was one of our biggest, one of the best things that we ever did. And a lot of people are like, this website looks so out of date. Why are y'all even worrying about using it? IndieDB did a lot of good for us, both in the, like, if you actually have the drive to, get your project out there and you actually have like understand how to, okay, I have a goal and I want to get it done. Get yourself structured, get yourself, kind of figure out, like, break your project into chunks and then post a general timeline, like create your page on IndieDB for your game. And, start posting volunteer job ads. We found a lot of people through that. And with some of our posts that we made it up to like the top 10 games on IndieDB back in like 2020 or something like that. And the ModDB, which is also linked to IndieDB, posted a thing on Twitter about us, saying, look at this up and coming Halo project. It's super, super cool, blah, 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 so we got a little bit of exposure through that specifically. So if you're like really wanting, like, in driven to, get your project out there and you have the drive to actually pull through and finish it, IndieDB is a great, like, they have a great community. And, not sponsored by them in any way. I didn't sound like that, but literally they've just done a lot of good for us. And, that's that, create your organization, create your game, post a timeline, post some updates, post some job ads. And, we found most of the concept art you see on the stream, or you have seen on the stream, was made by people that we found on IndieDB. In fact, two of our concept artists did pretty much almost all of what you see in terms of the concept art. But yeah, definitely a great resource. And yeah.
Yeah, I would say if you've never worked on games, fan games is a good way to, one, see if it's really like a passion of yours. And I feel like it's a good way to find other personality types that you work well with.
Exactly. I actually, kind of branching off of that, the fan games are the best way to figure out how to not make a game. And I say that because you will find so many people that want to make a game, right? You might be in the same position that you want to make a game, but you're not, like, you don't know how, right? So you join a fan game, or you start a fan game. In fact, there used to be years ago, I remember seeing like tons of new fan games just pop up out of nowhere. Play as a brute, play as a freaking, I don't know, jackal, or play as like all these little Halo fan games that like wanted to copy Installation 01 because they had gained popularity. And like, I will say, Coral did pop up out of that. I had some ideas before they did their big 2017 push, but that was really when you started to see the Halo fan game community kind of grow into what it is today. Because, they gained a lot of media attention. And, if it's like, oh, well, if the fans can do it, then anyone can do it. It kind of created that, mentality. But the idea and the reality behind, especially Installation 01, is that people don't know what to do. They were never professionally trained, right? And because of that, you started seeing lots of mistakes. I won't get too much into stuff about IO1. I probably know too much. But I remember they restarted their project, like their code base, like so many times. And while Coral did do that a few times, it was more so like we tried to stick with one system. And if the core of it just was like so bad that we couldn't work with it, we would just say, okay, we'll bring over some of the stuff we worked on before and just kind of start new with some of the things. Like with the Unity version, we completely started from scratch at one point and ended up building a thing that wasn't too bad in the end. Yeah, it did need a lot of work and polishing and a lot of fleshing out, but one of the things I learned and looking back on that now is that that Unity version of the game could have been fleshed out. It's just I didn't know how, right? Like I didn't know, I didn't have the knowledge of how to build certain systems in a game. And moving over to Unreal Engine, while it is a bigger learning curve, which is what pushes a lot of people away from using Unreal Engine, I learned about a lot of systems and how a lot of the systems should be structured, especially for a first-person shooter video game.
Yeah, that was the same kind of thing that happened to me. Even though I'm not doing as much on the tech side, I learned a lot more about how the back end of games work because Unreal is more, I guess, exposed in a lot of ways. I don't know how to put into words, but there's you either learn it or you just don't succeed in Unreal. And for Unity, you can kind of BS around and never truly know what you're doing and still make something.
But you can do it the right way. You know?
Yeah.
The same way that you could also bake a pie or bake a cake by first inventing the universe and then doing everything from there. You know, like that's the thing is like Unity's great for very small projects again because you can BS it. And I won't go much more into that at least for answering this question. But that's kind of why a lot of people, when they start out, they recommend Unity for people. And nowadays, people are starting to move away from it and recommending Godot, recommending Unreal Engine, of course. It is a little bit easier now than like when we were first hopping in because there were some changes and stuff that they made to kind of make developing games a bit easier. You have to remember that there was that, and then there's the documentation wasn't as good, and people didn't really know, like the public didn't really know as much, right? You know, you come back to it from 2018 to now, like that's like 5 or 6 years worth of Unreal Engine tutorials, you know, that people have been making. And Unity had been around since 2006 in the public eye. When Unreal Engine, it was like 2015. So there was a large amount of time where people didn't really use Unreal Engine or couldn't use Unreal Engine in like an indie sense. Where anyone can just kind of go on the website and download it. So, you know, that was part of the reason why when we originally changed to Unreal Engine in 2018, which I'll get into that later, we didn't really do much in it because we didn't really understand it. And that's also kind of ties into when you join a fan game or create a fan game, you're really going to learn how to not make a game as opposed to how to make a game. And you know, a lot of the people that you're learning with, you know, if it turns out to be like me and Tori, you know, you're going to learn together, you know, you're going to click really well, work together and learn how to make a game, you know, because that's really what you want at the end of the day. I mean, of course, you're going to want to learn the don'ts, but then at some point you're going to have to learn the do's, you know?
Yeah. And I would say it's really admirable to like end up like making a project on your own, but there's something like super special about getting like a core team together over time.
And
when I came in, I kind of felt that instantly with you two in general.
Right.
So under my breath, I've been running back and forth messing with the stream.
You're good.
But I also wanted to say I did an episode of this show last week that didn't end up getting the audio of my guest.
But
my guest, CyberWave, he's just been going like, what's the word? He's just been like hammering down on this one project for so long. And that's where he learned all game development stuff.
Yeah.
And for him, it's paying off, but it's like, I don't know. I feel like a fan game is probably a really good way to find your core team, like going forward.
Oh yeah, I think it's because that's actually what started happening with us. We started to transition a large portion of that team over to CoralWave, and because like one of the things about doing a project solo is, especially when it's ambitious, because I've seen his project and we've talked a bit, and his project's. Yeah, and his project's kind of ambitious, and doing it on your own can be a nightmare, especially if you're not super public about it. And because then you can at least get some public support, some ideas, and then some money, and it's a little bit, potentially, it's not guaranteed. And stuff like that can help build it up. But when you have something like where we started, we had Coral, and then that we brought some of the team over from Coral to CoralWave, and now we have some people to actually work with, and it doesn't feel like we're always just digging into a giant mountain all by ourselves, or a never-ending tunnel, whatever whatever analogy you want to pick. And yeah, I do. I also find that for me, I work better in team environments when there's more people that rely. Which is me, as much as I might want to do something or ambitious about it, doesn't always seem to happen. But if there's like a team involved, I feel like there's people who actually rely on me, and I'm more present and able to be there, stuff like that.
Yeah. So I'm for anyone listening, I'm gonna have Cyberwave back on at some point, and hopefully I can get a hold of that demo that you guys were playing.
Oh yeah, I'm sure if he doesn't mind, I have it on my computer. So if he doesn't want to like re-upload it, I can just send it to you. That's up to him though, but I'm sure he wouldn't mind. But that demo is from like 2019, so he's made a lot of like
Marky.
He's learned a lot since that specific thing. But I still think it's a very good milestone to kind of touch on in that sense, like for his stuff, because I remember watching him play that specific demo back when that was like the most recent. Like we kind of fell out of touch for a few years, but like the one time that we were like in touch for a little while, I just remember being so like not jealous, but like I always thought it was so awesome that he could build an entire game on his own. And, it's one of those things where like, being able to learn a skill like that, I really commend it, being able to stick with it.
Oh yeah.
And clearly learn, like he does a lot of good work. And so we're, talking about possibly having him help out with some of our stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah. And that's another thing too, is like because of our fan game, that's where we actually met him, and
yeah.
But anyway, as far as CoralWave, what are, not to be specific, but what are like some of the like, what are some of your plans like going forward as far as like projects that aren't fan games? And how do you...
running? Oh, you got it. Sorry.
It's all good. I don't know. I'm trying not to reveal anything, obviously, but
yeah.
As far as your personal projects with CoralWave, like the textualizer for textualizer, is that a part of CoralWave, or is that your personal project?
So for textualizer, which I guess we can jump into if you guys want to, is going to be a part of CoralWave. Originally, I was kind of thinking the tool itself might be my thing, but it's really built for CoralWave, and then I have all of our other systems and structures we have planned, partly leaning into this, and of course they all connect to each other.
Before we get into that, I think we should explain what to the viewers what Vertextualizer is.
Yeah,
because I'm sure that most everyone doesn't necessarily know about it, and kind of what goals it serves, and like what it is in general, right?
Yes. Yes.
So I'll let you do it, talk about it, because it's your brain baby.
Yeah.
Do you want to share anything like that?
Yeah, I'll share it here in a sec.
Okay, let me get
but I do want to explain a little bit of kind of some of the overall plan, and then I'll kind of show the screen here. So I'm not going to get into all of the systems, but we have a lot of systems and tools we want to develop. Some things are to hook into something that like Unreal already has, or maybe recently just announced with 5.2. And some things are just a generalized tool we want to use, and they all kind of work together. And we have, again, some other things that are going to build onto it. It's all going to be like eventually building into itself, and hopefully we'll make a really cool kind of team workflow, not just specifically for artists getting their stuff in the engine or getting their tools ready. But this tool is called Vertextualizer, and it's going to be the backbone for a large portion of especially any generation we want to do. Because if anybody's ever used geonodes, they know that trying to get your geonodes to separate or work individually with geometry node elements. So, like, say you make a city. I'm sure if you're into actual, if you've ever done geonodes and you've tried to make a city, you're like, okay, cool. How do I work with these buildings individually? You have to make like all these extra pieces, and then it becomes like a whole nightmare to work with. So I wanted to build a tool that lets me effectively work with basically data on the geometry, kind of like vertex painting or weight painting or something along those lines. But I wanted something that didn't necessarily have to be directly into that. I was originally going to be just like vertex painting, and then somebody else kind of made their own vertex painting tool, and it's actually really good, and it works as a great just artist friendly vertex painter. And I don't really want to compete with that anyway. That wasn't really the space I wanted to enter into. This is going to be more for like ID mapping, marking areas for generation, stuff like that. So I was messing around with some stuff, so ignore all the cuts on here. And also I have a theme because I was bored one day. But anyway, so say I have a geometry node set connected to this. And as you can see, it gets rid of the geometry. But let's say this isn't chaos like it is right now, and I wanted to maybe paint this corner or this edge here white. So I have a list here. I'm going to eventually have this in a drop-down menu like this. It's actually, I forgot. Now it's white. It's doing its thing. The other thing this will allow us to do is now have data we can actually work with and change. It doesn't always have to be colors. It could be numbers. It could be whatever. But by having that, I can now put cone there. And now we could have this be for like windows or other types of assets or something we want to do. So now we can control elements of our buildings, or maybe even just general hard surface models we're making or something along those lines. So by doing that, I can do another one. I can also push this right now. You can see, look, another cone spawning on the corner. And this is just a simple geometry node set that I built for this demonstration, not really anything else. The tool's still being worked on right now. I only have the color element working, but yeah, it can do a lot of cool things. I can change the different type of things over here. I don't have the selection element set up yet because I have to re-put that back in, but you'll also be able to select areas you've already marked before. So with something like this, if I wanted to reselect the white that I painted, and so I can change it or do whatever, you'll be able to do that as well. You can technically do it with my old one, but I'm not going to go through that. It's kind of a nightmare. So yeah, that's going to be the main thing it'll allow us to do, and that's going to be at least its early stages. So yeah.
So I wanted to add to that as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Vertextualizer, basically the main purpose in its abstract is adding data to specific vertices. So a 3D model is made up of vertices, basically little 3D points, and then those are basically stitched together using a face. And so basically the face is like the surface that connects that like gets connected by 3D points. The 3D points that you're seeing with certain data, you can actually, like, attaching data to specific vertices, you can do the things like generation here. Say, for instance, you wanted to remaster an old game and it just used textures for the windows. You could build a window asset and then go into the model for the building and then like cut the model up so that you can have a point, like I want the window here, and it will just automatically add the window. And for games that used a lot of instancing, basically multiple instances of the same asset, you could take, one or two buildings that are commonly used, do that, and now you have much higher level of detail on that building asset. You can replace that in the game, and now you've basically effectively made a much better looking asset. That's one instance of what it could be used for. Another instance is actually completely separate from generation. You can actually, one of our plans is using this data, figuring out how to import this data directly into Unreal Engine so we can use it for some of our internal systems. So I'll get into the game that it's going to be used for a little later, but basically we wanted this system that basically effectively allowed a character in Unreal Engine that's not like doesn't normally get affected by like gravity, so if you walk, like if you go up a ramp, the character's not going to shoot up off the ramp. They're going to continue to walk normally because that's normally what a character would do in a video game. Say we wanted to have a thing where like we wanted this ramp that's not that steep to actually shoot you up a lot higher, kind of give a more like arcade racing effect. We can actually, it's like put a multiplier, right? Or like an additive thing onto the geometry itself. So like imagine you take whatever value of the vertice that's below you, and add 1 to it, right? So default would be 0. So 1 would be your multiplier. And then say you added, had a model at the end of your ramp, or like or some 3D points at the end of your ramp that says, yeah, I want the player to be able to like go up 2 times as high, 2 times as like shoot up 2 times as high as they normally would. You can do that. You could use it for all sorts, like AI could eventually use it, like not AI like chat GPT, but more like in-game video game AI could use it for points of interest, direction of traffic, which is actually something we saw from a GDC talk about Burnout Paradise and how they did the flow of traffic. And they effectively did it through vertex colors, which is kind of effectively what this is using. So it's a very effective tool, and we want to be able to release it to everybody at some point so that
actually a lot of our tools are going to probably make its way out to the dev world. We don't know which ones specifically, but we basically, our workflow right now is build them, test them internally, make sure they all work, and then eventually we'd like to release most, if not all of them. But again, I don't want to give a guarantee. I don't know what we're going to do. We still haven't talked about each and every thing we're building and how much is going to show the light of day and how much is going to just be internal. But ideally, we'd like to help support the development industry in our own way, and so that's part of why we want to be able to have somewhat of an open.
Yeah, because there's so many things that we wish we had when we were starting development. And while these tools definitely have a learning curve to them, we build them, so we the learning curve is inherently like gone in that sense for us specifically. But eventually, we'd like to write like tutorials and kind of like get people introduced to some of the stuff we're working on, because I feel like it's one of the situations where these once like the indie developers get their hands on these tools, it'll completely revolutionize the way that assets are built. This combined with some of the other systems we're building, if we end up deciding to release them, you could have a completely separate workflow from what is done normally in industry. And not that that's necessarily bad. Kind of the idea behind a lot of our tools is to not just follow like sheep in the line of the industry. It's more so paving our own path, or paving the path that the industry we think the industry should go down. And something that Tori and I commonly run into is, hey, we have this idea. This is an amazing idea, man. We should like try building this someday. Oh, we don't have the resources to build it right now, or we'll try working on it for a little bit. Yeah. And while we're working on it, someone else will come out with that idea, like will be like exactly what it is, or like we use this in some big budget AAA title, or we are planning to develop this system, and it's one thing that it's infuriating first off, to see that other people are doing it, but in the same light, we're also like excited because we're on the right path. Of course, we're not infuriated for a long period of time. It's just like, what? Like, that was our idea. Not that we're the first people to come up with some of these ideas, but the idea that we're on the path of the new emerging technology in the industry, right? Once we have the resources, to be able to build a lot of this, it's going to be amazing, because I feel like specifically CoralWave is kind of going to be on the edge of the industry in terms of like, a lot of the systems that we build. And, now that we're working in Unreal Engine, it's going to be amazing because a lot of those systems are going to integrate well with Unreal Engine. So you're going to have the Fortnite budget, the big budget, amazing, like pretty engine that runs on anything from phones to, next gen consoles and your gaming PC. and you'll also be able to develop a lot of these assets easier, or have more artist friendly tools available, and a lot of things to help indie studios get their things done. I won't get into that, but yeah, we have a lot of things that we are wanting to kind of break the mold of, but only in the areas that we feel like kind of need a little bit of a revamp. So that's kind of our game plan in terms of that. Make the games we want to play using the methods we want to use, and making the industry better for everyone.
Yeah, I'll say another bonus about building a team of really creative people is we all kind of have our own things that we're working on anyways, and they end up kind of coming together in sort of a synergistic way where multiple projects are being worked on at once.
Yeah.
And that has like a snowball effect.
Yeah.
Like we will eventually be at a point where
is he cutting out for you, or is it just?
Yeah, he's cutting out.
Okay.
Damn it. Yeah, let me turn off my camera.
All right.
But apparently, according to the chat, we were all made by ChatGPT.
I saw that. You know what? I'll take it. No one, only ChatGPT could create something as perfect as me.
Perfect. Yeah.
Do you guys want to touch on AI real quick?
Like as in ChatGPT stuff, or?
Yeah, just in general, like pros, cons. What do you think?
Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, what do you think about? I don't know. I personally, I feel kind of like where it is right now. It's more of just like a tool to sort of like boost some things, but it's not like we're at a point where you can just press a button and something amazing comes out. As far as like the full.
Yeah. So AI, it's a blessing and a curse because it's effectively a tool. A lot of people see it as they're going to get replaced by AI, and you have to remember that AI, just like anything else, is a tool that is kind of revolutionize like society eventually, but we're not at that point yet. I mean, the biggest revolution we had since before AI was computers. Computers kind of are everywhere, but that doesn't mean that people are obsolete because computers exist. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of things with automation that, some people ended up losing their more manual jobs because computers were able to, computers/robots were able to sort of automate a lot of tasks. But overall, I think AI will be an amazing tool for creators and for visionaries and for developers to do make the things they want to make without having to reinvent the wheel every single time. So, while AI image generation is really controversial in some areas, especially in the artist world, because, it's like, oh, well, it was trained on people's art. You also have to remember that like people were trained on people's art too, right? People were trained on people's code. You always have to have a point of reference. Nothing in this world is like 100% original anymore, whether it comes from AI or somebody's making it. And one thing that I really saw as well was like, we're making a fan game. It's a fan game of an already existing IP. And like, we're taking specific detail inspirations from, other people's art in that sense, right? Whether it's looking at Isaac Hannaford's concepts for Halo, all sorts of Halo content, or just all the different designs that we saw throughout the games. Like, we're having to take those details and we're saying, hey, make a version of this. How is the AI any different when you tell it a text prompt, hey, make a version of this? It falls within the copyright grounds because the copyright grounds would be effectively Microsoft. They still own the Halo IP. And so, you can create some if you're creating something within the Halo
I'm
IP.
talking like this now. My headset thing came off.
If it's within the Halo IP, then it's still, bound to that copyright. But it's still inspired by Halo. If you train it on Halo and you tell it to make Halo, it's going to be Halo, right? And I feel like it's up to the user at that sense, or at that point, because you could have an artist create fan art for anything, right? Some people, if you've been on the internet long enough, you've seen fan art that you probably don't want to see of certain characters that you really enjoy, right? Doing things that you think are not appropriate for that character. Like, it's one of those things where, like, a human artist could just as easily and effectively create those things and use styles and inspirations from certain things. Like, when you're exposed to stimuli in the world, you always gain that a little bit of inspiration. Like, oh, I like how they do their drawings for, I don't know, arms on a character. Like, or, I like how this person draws eyes, like the shape. I think that, we're going to take some inspiration from that and kind of build our own thing out of it. And AI just effectively automates that process, So I think AI is an amazing tool in that sense, and will pull from its own inspirations based on what it's trained on. So the more art that it's trained on, the less from one source it's being, it's pulling from. And not saying that everyone should, submit to the hive mind and post all their, have all of their art trained on, trained by the AI. But, like, in that sense, it's not really that much different than a human drawing the same, thing. I think it should follow the same rules and respect as any human artist should have for whatever source material they're pulling from. Which is why I think AI art generation has gotten so far so quickly, is because not everything, like almost nothing in this world is original anymore. And so, that for legality slash, like moral sense, I think it's just more so a tool. And if it's original enough, which would be probably decided by a court, then it can be used, and copyrighted by whoever is, generated that. Otherwise, it would be like, if you generated, superpower armor with XYZ, blah, 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 and it comes out with basically Master Chief. It's basically Master Chief, right? Unless Microsoft says, yeah, we don't care. It's still Master Chief, and you have to follow the rules of, Halo. And so, it's one of those things that, like, I feel like in the game development world specifically, AI would be amazing to use, just as like a quick, like, I have the text, that I like, or just words that I want to, kind of put onto a canvas, right? And just kind of tinker around with it. It doesn't have to replace, and probably won't replace, human-made concepts, because for 3D modelers, you have to, there's proportions you have to take into account. There's specific shapes. You can't get multiple angles of the same thing easily, or it's not worth your time trying to get multiple angles of the same shape with AI art. You might be able to get like environment like inspiration, but it's not going to give you specifically what you want, even if you tell it specifically what you want. It might be impressive in terms of the quality, but it's always going to be missing certain context and style that you really want for your game. So same thing with ChatGPT.
I also think that a big thing with AI is going to be how it can really help, like like the individuals or the smaller teams comparative to the big industry. And I think at the end of the day, it'll actually make smaller teams more likely to be successful, like, say, something in the scale of CoralWave or something along those lines. It could be much more helpful there than it would probably be, or not probably be. It will be equally as helpful in a large company, and that's where it might threaten like jobs and stuff, but it'll actually hopefully help secure jobs with the smaller companies that can now, hey, we need extra help. Well, I can ask ChatGPT, or hey, we don't have a concept artist, so we can ask Stable Diffusion, and like now all of a sudden you can fill in some of those gaps. And yes, I do think that big companies will just some of them, they're soulless, let's just put it that way. So if they can find a way to not hire somebody or do something, they probably will. Or they can reduce their staff, they probably will. But I do think it's one of those things that can also very much so help, like Nate was saying, help assist your things. You need somebody gives you a crazy idea and it's in their head, and the concept artist is like, well, I think I have a vision, and he can't seem to match it. Well, now you can maybe have AI kind of fill in the gap and have some of those like kind of seed ideas that you can concept from. I also think when it comes to art, at the end of the day, there will always be the want for art to be made by people and not machines. And so I don't think it'll ever fully replace artists, no matter how good it gets at recreating the same thing artists can do. Even if it does all the things that Nate was bringing up, if it fills in all those gaps and does everything, I think there will always be a want and need to have people do it. Because I think that's one of those constants is art is from people for people. And the only time it's not is if you want it just to convey something that is, again, like a commercial, right? So I don't think artists are going anywhere, but I don't think we'll be in the renaissance we're in now. We'll be in some other place. I don't know what that'll be, but we'll be somewhere. Yeah, I think at the moment it'll be more assistive. In the next few years, I think it'll be generally more of an assistive process where people can now just be more efficient and better at the things they do. After those few years, I'm not sure, because that'll be more established in industry. We'll have a better idea of the full extent. And if any governments have an issue with it, they'll have made their stances as well. Like who knows at that point. But yeah, I could go on probably way too long about the topic, but yeah.
Yeah. I want to move on from like the hypothetical.
Yeah.
And specifically, does CoralWave use AI at all?
At the moment, we're just kind of looking into it as an option because, of course, like we said, there's benefits. Nothing is set in stone in terms of our like development pipeline, but we are definitely looking into it because, why not?
Yeah.
At this point, any sort of resource that any developer can get, is great. And if we can figure out a solution, definite solid solution, that boosts our speed or workflow, then I think we should definitely take advantage of that. It's one of those things that like we can't do everything ourselves, right? Just be honest. We like building games, we build games, but that doesn't mean that every single little piece of every little line of code we can build by ourselves, or every piece of concept art. I mean, yes, you could have an entire have concept art made and all that, and like Tori was saying, it's great for a lot of seed ideas. ChatGPT is really good with code, so it might be a little worrying there in terms of programmer jobs, but when I've used it, it's been more so helpful and okay, this is probably how I should do it. The only issue with it is that it's confident in being wrong as much as it's confident in being right. And so because of that, it's kind of misleading. You really have to learn how to make the prompts all correct and give it specifics of exactly what you want it to do. And so, but even then, you might still be left with half complete code or something that's missing that it's not taking into account. And it could be to the point where you're asking you're tuning the prompt so much that you're spending as much time tuning the prompt as you would be writing the code in the first place. Eventually, it'll probably those kinks will probably get worked out where you could just kind of tell it, hey, I want to do this, and it writes you that. But I don't think it'll completely replace developer jobs because you have to understand and be involved with the environment that you're working within too. That's a thing that I think a lot of people don't understand when they're getting into programming is the development environment. So you're probably going to see more of DevOps using AI to program. Of course, the developers themselves, the programmers are going to use it. But I doubt you're going to see people like artists going in and having them write, having the AI write full C++ applications without any help from anyone that's ever done like technical stuff or like setting up a C++ environment in the first place, setting up a Java environment in the first place. You know, you have to set up all the compilation stuff. I mean, a lot of it's usually automated by whatever development environment you're using, like Visual Studio or, you know, JetBrains or whatever. But you still have to know how to, you know, do that and fix whatever issues that GPT or GPT-4 in the future would ever come up with. And, you know, so it's one of those things that like, it's like having a helper, but the helper isn't going to do everything, right? You always have to have some level of work, and maybe in like a few years in the future, it'll do everything. But even then, you still like, you know, programming is not just writing code. It's not just typing out the words. It's
There's
all
some
about
logic behind
how every single system works together and comes together to make a cohesive program, right? Especially nowadays. Now, back in the day, you know, if you had like the Unix mindset where one program with what for one function, you know, you could get away with doing more chat GPT code in that sense, just having it write the entire program. But like if you're building a video game, you have to have all sorts of handlers for 3D models, you know, how you handle audio, you know, every single system has tons of subsystems, and you have to have both the, you know, understanding of writing the code, but also have the big picture of all of the systems working together in mind. This is where Unity allows you to kind of BS it, because you can just say, hey, by the way, the script that kind of might exist in this world at some point, yeah, by the way, just like set a variable on this and just kind of leave it there. You know, like, I mean, you can kind of do that in Unreal. It's just not as easy. And there's a lot of, you know, easier ways to do it in Unreal Engine. Going back to that topic, but back to AI, you need to know that bigger picture. So one thing that Tori and I had mentioned before was that we think that a lot of the higher up people, so the more senior developers, and the more the producers and visionaries are probably, if they have any sort of programming knowledge, they're probably going to be the ones to stay around in big companies if AI takes over in terms of writing code, because they're going to be the ones that know that big picture and know what to expect from the AI and know what to expect from what they would like, for instance, what a developer would write. So like they know what they want, right? As somebody who's just not a programmer, you both won't understand the environment, but you also don't know what you want. Chat GPT can kind of just help you write what you want, if that makes sense. So it's really a tool at the end of the day, and you have to know how to use that tool, just like a screwdriver versus a drill. You know, you have to know how to use it.
Yeah, I kind of want to move on from AI.
Okay.
But it sucks. My brother's not here anymore. He was with us, and then he made a mess right before we started and had to go. But he's 10 years older than me, but he's actually had a career in the tech industry as a coder.
Mm-hmm.
Just not in video games, but we're getting into video games. And he was told when he was first getting into coding as like a teenager that computers were just a fad and they were going to go away. And I feel like
I've heard people talk about that.
Sort of the same.
Even things like you would need a certain amount of memory and stuff like that.
Yeah. And so maybe I'll have him talk about it in a future episode, like his perspective.
Yeah, that would totally be cool to see.
But as far as like, I kind of want to get into this other project that CoralWave's working on as much as we can. And I know when we officially come out with it, we'll have more to talk about with Vertextualizer too.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as like some of the stuff you're working on in this new project that affects Coral, I was interested in like your journey into the networking issues.
Okay, so I guess I'll start off by saying I've learned a lot of things from this project that Sperdunky's talking about, and I'll talk about it because it's one of our less lock and key projects, because it's like it's more so we're building a universe we think is cool. You know, oh, cool this, cool that, and while it does have, you know, Vincent's the visionary for it, it's one of those things where like, you know, I guess Tori and I are being a little bit more secretive about some of the other projects that we want to work on, especially because they're a little bit more. Not to say that this project isn't original, because it has a lot of original elements and it is kind of inventing its own genre in terms of the actual gameplay. But there's some like really out there ideas that we have for some of our other projects, and they also involve like, you know, IP, like our own new universe and IP stuff that I won't get into, of course, because that's for y'all to experience later on. But basically, what Sperdunky is referring to is a project that we're working on called Battle Balls. It is a third-person class shooter, and it's a multiplayer game. Of course, it's an arena multiplayer. We might eventually use some like story mode, but that's for later talks. But basically, a lot of the things that I didn't know how to do from Coral was build work around a networking infrastructure, right? Unreal Engine has built-in replication, which is amazing. You just need to know how to use it, and need to know how to effectively what's the context? Think about everything in a way where everyone's running a different world, and you need to basically have a line of communication between every single client that's in that world and in that simulation, and tell them, okay, this is what is going on. And then you also have to take into account, it's like a big game of telephone, but with like latency involved, and you need that to feel like it's not like you're in the same world, right, at the same time, and kind of have to cover up a lot of that latency while also keeping it secure. Because if you give the client the ability to say, hey, I'm going to jump, so tell the server to jump, and the server has to listen and say, okay, the player said jump, so I'm going to do it. Then you have to, if you think about cheaters could be like, okay, I'm going to tell the server to jump a million times and shoot me way up in the air. The server's not going to do anything except jump a million times. So you really have to take into account, the fact that, you don't want to give the client too much power over the player, over the environment, over anything, but you also don't want to have the server so, like, everything rely on the server so much that the game becomes laggy because it's having to play a game of telephone. For instance, that system we were working on that I was telling you about, with the vertex and the jumping power that we were talking about, like the system to even trigger that kind of launch in the first place. Right now we have it attached to the server. The server does that and it replicates back to the client. The issue with that is that now the client waits however milliseconds that you have in terms of your ping to tell the client, like it takes that many milliseconds to tell the client, hey, we're jumping now. So what normally the client would expect is to go down if it's off a ramp. So you'll have this thing where they'll go down and then shoot back up in the air because that's the server is authoritative over the player. And so there's a lot of like small things like that, or the animation system isn't updating properly because this one little thing is not replicating. But if you replicate it, then now the players are all jittery because it's sending so much data, 60 to 200 times a second, depending on how often you're sending updates. So it's really a big balance, and having to learn kind of controlling every world as the server and controlling your own world. And then as the client, being able to see the world in a to be able to see the world in the most accurate sense of, like as close to how the server sees it. So there's so many different things that go into play there. But things like the game modes all run on the server. That's an Unreal Engine thing. And so a lot of the code relating to winning, losing, and all of that is handled by, the server. But like originally we had it where the player sent the die function to the server. So the client would tell the server, hey, I died. And because of that, like you could spam that and basically like spawn in like 18 new players in the game. And you could just kill your own player and it would give you kill points. So there's so many things like that, like edge cases you have to like take into account, both in terms of bugs in the game, but also how could someone else take your code and exploit it for their own gain, whether it's stats, whether it's ruining the fun of others, and really taking that into account. And that's a completely new world that I had to kind of learn, so I could apply it to Coral. And there's a lot of new things that I've learned from that I still have yet to apply to Coral, which is kind of part of the reason why we haven't really like revealed as much in terms of Corals, because we've been spending so much time learning a lot of like those multiplayer and just game components with battle balls, and we're going to apply that knowledge back to Coral. Kind of the opposite of what we did when we created CoralWave.
Nice.
But yeah.
And what would you say to someone who is just getting into learning networking? Like, where should they start?
I think there's a few core principles that you should take into any tutorial. Because if you're like the easiest way to be able to get into that, of course, like most things nowadays, is through like YouTube videos, and there are even some courses out there that are pretty good. You just have to take into account never let the player have too much power, and figure out how to hide the lag. So if you can have the client and the server do something at the same time, like, oh, well, the client's going to expect that the player is going to be launched. So we're going to launch the player on the client just locally, in addition to launching it on the server. And then the server will kind of handle the lining up, but that lining up will be so much closer and less jittery than if you were to just have the server tell the client that, like, no, you're going to do it. Like, think of it like an instant response versus like some like, being like a proactive versus a reactive, right? And so you want to be proactive on the client, but not to a fault. Because if you're proactive on the client and give the client too much power, in terms of actually logic stuff, then they can abuse that. But if you don't ever predict anything on the client, or don't ever run things like firing the like the muzzle flash, or the effects that happen when you shoot the gun, those should happen immediately when you press the mouse, like or press the trigger, because you are locally firing that, and it feels, even if the bullets are slightly lagged, it's going to feel a lot like better. And that's what we found in our playtests, is that people responded a lot better to their bullets lagging just a little bit, as opposed to their entire firing lagging. It's like, why am I so jittery? Why am I so laggy? Well, we were kind of able to hide the lag of bullets spawning by playing those effects locally and then telling the server to spawn them. And of course, there's some other things you could do for specifically that problem. Things like predicting, what tick was the projectile fired at, and stuff like that. That you can kind of like play around with. But that's more advanced. If you're just like trying to get into it, just like use YouTube for some tutorials on replication in Unreal Engine. It's really, really, really easy to get into. But eventually you'll start realizing that it's a lot of work, and if, that's where you'll really, once you hit those crossroads, you'll realize, is this for me? So that's one of my big like pieces of advice is, don't give the player too much power in terms of their local client, and also make sure all of the actions that the player does are their own event, so you can trigger those separately and make your code a little bit more modular. The more monolithic your code is, the harder it's going to be to maintain, the harder it is going to be to build, the harder it's going to be for all of that. It's not a good idea, It's not a good idea to keep your code monolithic in any way, but especially your networking, because then you're gonna run into weird bugs. That's my advice.
And Tori,
Yeah.
you want to touch on some of the obviously Vertextualizer is a tool you've made, but as far as moving from Unity to Unreal, some of the technical art tools?
So it wasn't really till recently we started getting actual technical art tools made or developed at all. Everything else was kind of theory crafting and talking about stuff that was existing. Like when we were going from Unity, it was all kind of like Unreal to Unity, or sorry, Blender to Unity, Blender to Unity. And then now with Unreal has this tendency to want you to do as much as you can in their engine. So everything from like animation to not really modeling, but like you can do some level stuff now with one of their tools. Actually, a lot of level stuff. They have like a thing that kind of like does its own form of booleans and extensions and whatever. Um, and so Unreal has a lot of that area covered, where Unity kind of is like a blank slate that you kind of have to do all that stuff in, or you have to make it in something first and then port it in. Um, and so now that we know what we're working with, and I've gotten more technical over the years, I'm able to start building things like Protectualizer and actually have these plans. And actually, it's been kind of cool because I've been able to talk and work with Nate more on his level with stuff. Well, not at his level, but we can talk about things, and I can help theory craft and not just be like the artist who's like, I just want that cool thing. I can actually help come up with the cool thing or have ideas of how it could potentially work. And so they're more reasonable and realistic ideas, not just like this crazy idea from the artist. Yeah, exactly. And then like that was actually on the animation topic. One of the things that was kind of a weird area, and still kind of is, we never really went back to it, was that Unreal introduced what's it called? The control rig. And so we wanted to really figure out how to use that. But it's a little bit more complicated than just like basic animations, but it's also not super complicated. But we were originally kind of looking into it, and then we never fully figured out a plan, or at least tried the ideas we had. So that's something we will probably eventually go back to, but for now we're doing more of a traditional animation approach for at least Battle Balls. We might start to explore some other stuff or use control rig in the future, but yeah, that's kind of the plan for that. But for the most part, it's been more like, what can we do? How can we make this more streamlined? And that's what we're kind of doing now. Like again, the Protectualizer tools meant not only to help streamline generation, but also potentially modeling, where theoretically we can do a lot more simple things and get more out of it, which I can explain more and showcase later when I get a little bit more done. So maybe I'll be back on here or something at some point to show more of that. But yeah. So the idea now is to, instead of just trying to use the cool new thing or whatever, we're kind of just trying to make things so they can be easier to develop. Thus the technical art aspect. Yeah, I don't really have any more to add onto that area. It was more or less a smooth transition because the art side was the least affected, but also it was more like there's a lot of options than it was we had to hard set into things to make a huge transition. I think the biggest thing would be materials and textures. They have a different layout in Unreal than Unity, and we also had more access to make better materials technically. Better materials than in Unity. Not saying we couldn't. It's just Unity at the time when we did it was only code, and so that was the only way you could really do anything crazy, or if somebody else made something. At least that I was aware of.
It was before so HDRP was in its like infancy not when we first started. It didn't even exist when we first started, but it did. But HDRP did come along around like year 2 or year 3 of us working on Coral, and we decided not to use it because it was like, even though it did exist, it did complicate a lot of things, and there were still a lot of missing features. So we decided to stay with the standard rendering pipeline, or I guess they call it the kernel or embedded or whatever, the default one that Unity used before HDRP and SRP and all that other stuff. And even though there is the scriptable render pipeline, nowadays we tried it once. We tried HDRP, and we were like, it's just kind of really hard to use, and it, not that we couldn't learn it, but it's definitely a step back from their original rendering pipeline. And if you don't know how to use their original render pipeline correctly, then it's also, your game going to look like an asset flip. Which Coral kind of did for a while. Not that it actually used like asset flip assets, but like,
yeah,
it definitely had that Unity look to it for the longest time, and felt like a Unity game But we slowly started to um, slowly started to like build a better system until we got to something that was kind of reminiscent of Halo. Definitely looking back at it nowadays, we could probably make something that's a lot better than what we had at the time.
Yeah.
In fact, I actually had a little side project. I think it was the end of 2020, where I kind of messed around with that idea of like, okay, what if we took the Unity version and just kind of made it not suck as much? And
Yeah, I remember you doing that.
yeah, it was like, honestly pretty cool seeing what is possible. And
Yeah.
it's one of those things where like Unreal Engine's amazing. It's going to be the definitely the superior engine for like networking, even though we did have our own networking backend for Unity that Wes built. Unreal Engine's more fleshed out. I'm just being honest. Um, and it was one of those things where like I guess I saw at that point the potential of using like Unity as an experienced developer, but of course, we'd already made the switch to Unreal Engine, and part of my Unreal
Yeah.
Engine knowledge kind of went back to Unity, in that sense. And
Yeah, a lot of it's universal.
yeah,
For sure. And that was something that happened. Because that goes back to a little bit what we were talking about before. We had a period where I don't know if we publicly talked about it, but we were going to switch to Unreal, and then it didn't really. This is with Supernova. It didn't really work out. We decided it was too complicated, went back to Unity, and then we went back to Unreal again at some point. I think it was when they were announcing either 4.2 something or it was 5. I don't remember when we exactly made that transition over, but we
it
talked
was
about it again
2020.
with the.
It was UE5. When UE5 was
Okay.
announced, Wes was like, "We're
Yeah.
doing Unreal Engine. Like, there's no
Yeah.
way that Unity can compete to this."
It was one of those things where they made such a difference. Yeah, it was just like, okay, it's not just like, oh, we should do it because it's better. Blah blah. We also knew more about what we're doing. We restructured a lot of our stuff at that point. So yeah, that was
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I'm just looking at
Yeah.
the concept art on the stream and just seeing that sniper
Yeah.
rifle, man. I want to see that one done.
I know. Maybe it'll
Um,
be one of those things I do when we get the next steps of Vertextualizer done. Maybe it'll be a good
yeah.
test model.
Also, I know that we're not like answering questions from chat yet, but I did want to ask Sperdunky if we could talk about what Neon brought up about the music.
Yeah, actually, I was gonna say we need to start wrapping up here pretty soon.
Okay.
So I was gonna move on to questions, but before we do that, my question is: do you want to let people know when they might be able to get a hold of a version of Coral?
April 1st.
Of which year?
That one we'll have to figure out.
Well, April 1st, some point eventually.
You will get a version of Coral on April 1st, 2023. I can't guarantee its quality. We always usually come out with like a joke on April 1st. So the first one we did back in like 2019 was just one of the old Unity code bases, and it loaded up to the main menu and it would say like select here to begin, and when you click it, it would do nothing. So you would just literally just see the main menu just kind of going around, like because Halo, it has its main menu where it flies around, and we did the same thing. So that's all the game was just the title screen. Like that was the joke. We even threw like a little like Fortnite default dance on the Spartan in there. So if you looked really closely, you'd see a little guy default dancing. And then there was also the 2020 version of Coral. That was actually just a long story short. Someone I knew got upset at me, left the project or left like the testing, and then decided to try to leak a version of the game, the Unity version of the game, because the testers didn't have the Unreal version at this point. It was like when we were still in the very early stages, so they leaked the Unity version of the game in the public Discord server, and I was like, haha, you tried to leak the game? Not if I leak it first. And basically, so I deleted their version of the game because I didn't know whatever malware or virus they could have put in that. Didn't know it probably was fine, but I didn't want to take any chances. So what I did was I actually made a build of the Unity version. We were already in Unreal at this point, and I like pinged everyone in the server, and I was like, "Yo, by the way, y'all want to play Coral? Like, this is the version they had didn't have multiplayer. And so it was, but the version that I released did have multiplayer, and I hosted a server on my server PC, and we were all just, we had people like Chunkier Bean
Yeah.
and a few of the people from Contingency, like a lot of people. It was one of the most active times of the Coral Discord server. And it was a lot of fun. We turned something that could have been very negative into a positive. Like, I want to say it was like beginning of May, so a late April Fool's joke. Pretty late, but I was planning on releasing that build on April 1st anyway. So,
Yeah.
it was one of those things that I kind of missed that deadline, and they kind of reminded me, hey, by the way, and we played
And
the game.
How can people join the public Coral Discord?
So I'm trying to think of a way to do it without saying some letters and numbers.
Can't we just post in chat for now and then?
We could post it in chat.
Yeah.
You could also go to the Twitter or Instagram page. So if you go to, I think it's at Coral Game on Instagram. So just instagram.com/Coral Game. There should be a link to the Discord server directly on there. Yes, it's on there. Twitter is Coral Fan Game. So twitter.com/Coral Fan Game. The Discord server is in the bio, or it has a little link for it. So if you want to join the Discord server, just go hop over to the Twitter, the Instagram. We're also on IndieDB. Like we mentioned earlier, we are on Game Jolt. I never post there, but the page exists.
I should probably set up a link tree or something.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that this potential build on April 1st will be available through the Coral Discord, which is public.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
And if you are interested in playing it, invite your friends too. If they have any interest in Halo, we're gonna be hanging out, having a good time. April 1st is on a Saturday, so I might actually call off work just for that. I think we'll have a lot of fun on April Fools, and our April Fools always are. They're always a blast. I always try to make sure that, like, we're all a community at the end of the day.
So
we're
true,
all fans, and we're all, we're here to have fun. Coral is not kept so under lock and key that nobody can know anything about it or see any gameplay before the game comes out, right? Like, we're game developers. We want to have fun. We do have serious time, but that doesn't mean that we can't have fun time, and we love having fun time with the community.
Fun time.
And if that means releasing a build of the game, just to, like, I don't know, stick around in it, like, so what? Everyone knows the game's not done. That's why it's not out.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing, is that most developers get up on such a high horse and like, oh, I don't want anyone to see this until it's completely finished. And it's like, people know the game's not done. That's why, they're there, to watch the game be developed. And hey, you want to play this little timestamp, this little point in time? Sure, go ahead.
We've always planned to be somewhat public. We just never got around to actually doing the things we want to do. Like, we want to do dev streams and all these things, and hopefully we'll actually start doing that for at least Battle Balls. I'd like to do it for Coral as well. But at this point, we're barely making enough time to do Battle Balls, so I don't know. I don't know if we'll get to do it.
We'll figure that out. We'll eventually. I think no matter what, we should end up doing all the things that we were planning on doing throughout the years. I won't get into that because I know we're trying to wrap up. One of them, though, was almost like a VTubing thing.
For
the marketing.
That was a fun idea.
So we had some cool ideas for that. And
honestly, that'll probably be even easier now. At the time, we were scrambling to figure out how to just do anything, and now that's probably a more viable idea. It'd be kind of fun.
So if you're interested in any of that kind of stuff, or just being a part of the community, we've been hanging out in the server a lot more in voice chat, so you'll be able to talk to us directly. And if you have any interest in joining the project, Discord server. I can't say it enough. The application form, how often do we check it? Not enough. Discord server is where you gotta be. Even if it means making a Discord account, do it real quick and hop in there. It's direct line of communication to both me, Tori, and the rest of the team. Sperdunky is in there too. And we'd love to see you there. Yeah, I mean, it'll be awesome.
Awesome. So we have some questions from the viewers.
Okay.
They want to know about music.
No, next
So-
question. Music isn't real, doesn't exist.
I don't.
So
I don't know if
music
it's
is an
actually
interesting
important.
topic in terms of Coral. If we're talking Coral Halo fan game, we've had two people create tracks for Coral. One of them did both of them did an amazing job. Neither of them were in like direct contact with at the moment because they did stuff a while ago, but we didn't really have the vision fleshed
Yeah.
out. So it's one of those things where now, and especially in the future, we do want to reach back out to those specific people and see if
Yeah.
they would have any interest in like scoring it while we're also working on, because we are working on like the story script, the screenplay, and eventually storyboarding the screenplay or not, yeah, the screenplay. And once we get to that point, I think we should be talking to those people again.
Mhm. One of our problems actually early in was bringing in, like, we brought music people in way too early when we couldn't even, like, we had no place to have any music, so we were sitting around doing nothing for most of it, and we barely
Yeah.
keep, yeah.
They
so.
end up leaving and all that stuff. That's usually what happens. So for music for Coral, there's two guys that do really, really good work. I think they are able to hit and nail that Halo style while still feeling like original. So you listen to it, and especially in the context of Halo, and you're like, this fits, right? I think but it doesn't sound over. It doesn't sound over like composed like a lot of American generic American like superhero music sounds, which I think is one of the big issues with some of 343's soundtrack. I won't get into that. I mean, not all of it's bad, of course, but you know, there's a sense of identity that I feel like is always lost with everything that 343 does.
Yeah.
So
on that note, how long do we actually have Sperdunky? Like, are we trying to really wrap up quickly, or do we still have like plenty of time?
Like 10 minutes at the most.
Okay.
Well, then it's a Marky about the music stuff. Since you were asking if you wanted to come on and talk about it because you're in the chat, I think if Sperdunky's willing to, we should try to have another session. Maybe we can do a little bit more of an art centric one for Coral/CoralWave, and then we can talk about, because there's like a lot of things like in the concepts that I wanted to kind of go over with the lore and some other things that we're going to go into that we didn't end up doing, which is fine. You know, just going with the flow of the conversation.
You're welcome to come back anytime. And that's the thing with Coral and CoralWave. There's enough people that are all doing different things that we can always talk about different aspects.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And Marky, by the way, is doing some music for a project on CoralWave. So he is within our development circle. He's not just like a random viewer. So
I think he also did some music for Downfall, right?
Yeah, he was the originally. That's how I met him. Actually, he was around Downfall when it very first started, and he was the audio director. But yeah,
perfect.
That's well, I would love to have him on here someday. So, but yeah,
I think it'll be fun. We'll definitely have to plan some more things, and we can we'll have to plan another one.
So for the next question,
Lasso Halo, which I believe that's Austin, right?
Yes, that's Austin.
He wants to know if there will be, specifically his question is, will there be a Battle Balls crossover equipment for Coral? But just in general, I'm interested. Will there be any crossover between Battle Balls and Coral?
Nothing, at least nothing probably official on like CoralWave's end. I can't say we might not have some type of thing going the other way because, again, Microsoft, it's their IP. Their whole thing is like you can't make money off of their
assets in your Halo project.
Yeah, if it refers too much to Halo, it goes over the top. So like we'd have to actually work a deal out with Microsoft at that point, and I doubt that's going to happen. But going the other way, some Battle Ball stuff in Coral, that could be a possible. Like we haven't talked about that, but it doesn't mean that that's more possible to have some fun with that.
People tend to make the comparison of the Battle Ball to like the Halo 3 power drain. So it might be kind of funny to have like a goofy like skull or something, or like some like modifier that like turns some of our equipment into like a battle ball, or like you like throw out a battle ball and it shoots out forward and explodes or something. We might do something like that at some point, just because we think it's funny. But the only issue with that is, we don't want to we don't want it to look like a promotion of our own project. or using Coral to promote our own game, like our CoralWave projects. So
Yeah,
that might be a little bit of a legal gray area.
We're trying to be
but
as
again,
careful as we can. We're in
but
a weird
again,
spot.
I do
doing
want
this.
to. I will want to get in contact with like somebody at Microsoft at some point, so I can kind of like figure out those like legalities.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really where like the start and end of Battle Balls in Coral are going to be. But the only
Sphere.
issue, the only issue is, or the not issue, where there might be a little bit of crossover is I am working on a technology for CoralWave specifically. It will be a product. So I want to put it out there that it is a product like Unreal Engine, where it's like its own piece of technology that will be licensed out to the people working on Coral Halo fan game. So that product will be just licensed out for free to the Coral Halo fan game developers for use in Coral and in Downfall. So there is a little bit of that, but it's more so we're building something that will help both sides, but not in this like the people that work on the tool.
Coral.
Yeah, the people that work on the tool and the technology aren't like specifically working on Coral, a Halo fan game. They're working on this specific thing that ended up getting used in Unreal Engine projects like Battle Balls, like our other stuff, and like Coral with through a license. So we'll license that out to Coral Halo fan game developers to be able to use. But that doesn't mean that it's CoralWave working on Coral. It's legal is kind of weird. You as a person is different from you as a like an entity. So you have to like, kind of work around. You might be the same person who works on Coral and CoralWave, but that doesn't mean that you can have that, like you can't swap spit like that. You gotta go around. So we're doing a lot of going around and doing things the right way. So that's answering that question. So you have any other questions for Sperdunky?
Yeah, did you see this question about the campaign, whether it's traditional Halo world
for
or do you guys
Coral?
that close to the vest?
For Coral,
Well, we can talk a bit about it. Yeah, to put it simply, it's linear. It's going to have some open elements. So kind of like how Halo campaigns are, where there's a lot of open stuff you can do. It doesn't feel like you're in a linear experience all the time, but it's still linear. We're not going to make that one. We talked originally about making it kind of open world, but it would be a lot of open nothing. So you'll have open environments as opposed to being a full-on open world. We still might build the world like an open world just for development's sake, but because especially now with Unreal's world partition stuff. But that we don't know yet until we start doing once we get back to the world building aspect of that. But it's gonna feel like it's gonna ultimately feel like again an open linear experience. So you won't feel closed in, but you'll be able to roam around and stuff.
For instance, on one of the levels that we're like planning are one of the experiences I've had in my mind as a visionary. I'll go over it real quickly. Is having almost like New Alexandria, but instead of it being like buildings, and that you have to fly across, it's actually islands, and you're driving a boat. So you would have boat combat in Halo, which was planned for Halo 3, it was planned for Halo Reach, it was scrapped from both.
Yeah.
Coral is 90% water. Why aren't we doing boats? You know what I mean? So one of the ideas was having that, and then maybe having some sort of like big event happen in a cave you go in at the end of the level. So that was one of the ideas that I had for a pretty long time in terms of like, a Coral mission. So it wouldn't be specifically like, walking in one corridor and shooting things. There's going to be a lot of that like openness that you love, like a lot of people love from Halo. Downfall, I'm not going to go into too much detail about Downfall since they're both under the same kind of entity at this point. But Downfall,
if you're going to say that, we might as well
open.
Explain that. It's kind of
maybe basically just working together. We're working together. That's all. That's all. That's all there is to it. We're working together. But they're going to be a little bit more open, but more in a few missions per level, if that makes sense. So a few different open worlds, but more condensed and catered to specifically the kind of gameplay that Downfall has, which is more tactical. But yeah, I feel like that adequately answers it in a short period of time.
Yeah.
All right. I also wanted
Um,
to add that Mike is back. I don't know how much you've been listening, Mike, but did you have any questions or anything you wanted to bring up?
It's a long 10 minutes.
Yeah, I missed a lot of that, so I've had a day, but I don't know if my questions are relevant at this point. So
Well,
you guys
we
know
are
me.
talking about potentially doing this again at some point soon. So maybe we can save them for then. If you come with new
Yeah, that
ones.
sounds good.
Because I know Sperdunky, you were saying you gotta hop off, so I don't
mhm.
want to. I don't. Me and
La-
Nate have a tendency to ramble and go on for a
la-
little too long.
yeah. Last question, because it's really quick. Smart scope, no for Coral, ADS for Downfall,
Yeah,
and no to Battle Balls because it doesn't make sense.
yeah.
Although it is there.
Yes, there is a zoom. There is a zoom, but it's not like, smart scope ADS.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
All right, I'm gonna switch mics real quick.
Okay.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm excited. Like,
I'm excited for
I
all of
want to I want to start talking more about Battle Balls publicly.
it. Yeah.
I know we've been all talking about that, and eventually we're
Yeah.
gonna open up a Patreon
Mhm.
for it. So there'll be
Yeah.
a way to support us and CoralWave in that endeavor. For Coral, we can't monetarily
Yeah.
can't make any money off of it. And we're not even like trying to just use Coral to get people to buy CoralWave stuff.
Yeah.
We're passionate about both
It'll probably
ideas.
be sometime soon. Actually, we'll start to
Yo, it's
properly.
Sperdunky.
Hey, there
He's
he
back.
is.
Our
Yeah.
host is eating.
Mm-hmm.
What manners.
First episode, I technically did another one, but it didn't get recorded.
First and a half.
Shout out to Nate/Jabod and Tori /YesFulman.
Yep.
Slash cats.
Amazing. Yeah, cats. Is my audio not coming through the stream?
Let me check. Say something.
Something?
You're very quiet and in my left ear. I don't know why.
I have to turn off mono and then turn it back on. Let's see here. You hear, baby? Right, how
Unless
does
you're a
this sound?
baby.
How does that sound?
That sounds better, I think. Yeah.
All right. So,
It's too bright, I can't hear
oh well about the audio.
you.
I will. Wait, there was something else I was going to say before we go.
I don't remember.
Great show. Amazing guests. CoralWave is the company.
Yes.
Coral is a different game
Yes.
through a different
Game
entity.
/ project ish.
Follow
Lots.
Coral the game on Instagram. Once this is edited on YouTube, I will have everything in the description. Like and subscribe. I lost my train of thought. I feel like there was something else.
Well,
I know
welcome
that feeling.
to the club.
Yeah.
I'll have you guys back on at some point.
Yes.
I'm going to try to
Yes,
do another
please.
stream next week with new guests to be continued on who that will be. And then for that episode that I did where the guest audio didn't get recorded, they're both going to come back, but I'm going to pair them with different people so we can explore 2 different games.
Okay.
This episode is not really typical. The way I plan to do it is to have 2 different developers who are working on 2 different projects, and then we talk about both projects.
I mean, technically it's true, except different developers are working on 2 different projects that both have to be the same projects.
Yeah, and you guys work together. And that's kind of what I was hoping for. Is what happened. You guys really
synergize your conversations together.
Mhm.
And yeah, so the whole point of this podcast, I guess, is I'm learning to be a game developer, and I'm really interested in this stuff. And I'm trying to learn from other people who work on different kinds of projects. And hopefully, as I get better, the show will get better. And really, that's all I got for you guys. Anything
Yeah.
else you guys want to say on
Awesome.
before we close out?
I have a question.
Oh.
Can we have an episode where it's the entirety of the Coral development team on at once?
Sure.
Oh.
The ultimate.
Yeah, it's we got to have the eternal episode with Sperdunky Eternal as the host.
Yes.
We got to have all of the everyone.
try. I don't
Coral
know.
and Downfall.
Yes.
You guys are I feel like that there's so many loud voices in the Coral team that once they're all together, like I can't really be the host.
Yeah, it'll probably
How much
escape
noise
everybody.
can we make? That's a
we
great
do have
point.
to
but
do once we actually like officially announce Battle Balls, we'll do another episode on that. But then we also need to do probably a stream where we're all just playing Coral.
Oh yeah, 100%. And Battle Balls, like
Yeah.
playing a little multiplayer match of it. I would love, especially
Yeah,
because
that'd
that's
be
farther
amazing.
along on the networking side. We could totally get a game up and show it off. Play the game and
Yeah.
let people kind of see their thoughts on it. Or give their thoughts on what they see.
All right. Well, in that, this has been a great show. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you coming on.
No
Same.
problem. Thank you for
As
having
my
us.
sign says, when you love what you have everything you need. And have a good day. This
Yeah,
is
you
Sperdunky
too.
and friends. I'm Sperdunky. These are my friends. Have a good night.